There is a room inside Madison Square Garden that most of the world will never see. No cameras, no fans, no ticket takers, just a quiet hallway that, on one summer night in July, held the biggest secret in sports and music at the same time. And the man who is now telling us what happened behind that door is not a reporter. He is not a wedding planner. He is a professional football player who caught passes for a living and somehow ended up seated inside one of the most talked about weddings in modern history. His name is George Kittle, and what he just revealed changes the way we understand that entire night. For weeks, the world had been guessing. Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce had gotten married, and almost nobody outside their inner circle knew the real details. There were blurry photos, there were rumors, there were a few official statements about designer dresses and custom shoes. But the real story, the human story, the one about laughter and family and surprise guests who never expected an invitation, stayed locked behind private doors. Until now, because almost 3 weeks after that wedding night, George Kittle sat down on a podcast and started talking. And once he started, he did not hold back. He talked about his parents being there. He talked about a comedian who had the whole room in stitches. He talked about a song, a very specific song, that got dedicated to a room full of tight ends in a way nobody expected. And piece by piece, the picture of that night began to come into focus. So let's step into that story. Let's go back to where it all began. Long before the wedding, long before the fame, back to a strange little football camp that started as a joke between friends and somehow became the reason an NFL player's parents ended up sitting inside one of the most exclusive weddings on the planet. This is the story of how a football tradition turned into a front row seat at a fairy tale. Picture the year 2021. The world was still finding its footing after a strange couple of years. Football was back, but something else was happening quietly in the background. A group of NFL tight ends, men who spent their careers being overlooked compared to quarterbacks and wide receivers, decided they wanted something of their own. They wanted a place where they could get together, train, learn from each other, and just be around people who understood exactly what their job felt like. Nobody outside the sport really understands what it is like to play tight end. You are part blocker, part receiver, part traffic cop in the middle of chaos. It is a strange, demanding position, and the men who play it tend to form a tight brotherhood. Two of the players who helped build that brotherhood into something real were Travis Kelce and George Kittle, along with former NFL tight end Greg Olsen. They created something called Tight End University. It sounds simple on paper. Bring tight ends together, teach some routes, talk some football, but it became something much bigger than drills and playbooks. It became a yearly gathering, almost like a summer camp for grown men who happened to be some of the best athletes in the world. And over time, it stopped being just about football. It became a place where friendships were built, where families started showing up, and where, without anyone fully realizing at the time, the seeds of a wedding invitation were being planted years before anyone even knew a wedding was coming. Because here is the thing about Tight End University. It was not just players. Wives came, parents came. It turned into this strange, wonderful mixing of football lives and family lives. And somewhere in that mix, George Kittle's father, a man named Bruce, started building a real relationship with Travis Kelce. Not a business relationship, not a quick handshake and a photo, a real one, the kind where two people just click, where conversations turn into inside jokes, where somebody becomes the guy you are always happy to see walk into a room. At the same time, something else was happening. Taylor Swift, the biggest music star on the planet, had started dating Travis Kelce. And as their relationship grew, she began showing up in unexpected places. Places like Tight End University. Now imagine that scene for a second. A summer gathering built for football players suddenly has one of the most famous women alive walking through it. You would expect chaos. You would expect crowds and cameras and total disruption. But that is not really what happened. Instead, something quieter took place. Taylor Swift did not just show up for a photo opportunity and leave. She stayed. She talked. She spent real time with people. And two of the people she spent that time with were the mothers of George Kittle's circle. Kittle's mother, a woman named Jan, and the mother of Kittle's wife, Claire, a woman named Shelley. According to Kittle, this was not a brief hello. This was hours of real conversation, the kind where people actually get to know each other. And whatever happened in those conversations left an impression. Taylor Swift genuinely liked them, not in a polite, forced way, in a real way, the kind of way that sticks with you. Now hold that thought, because we are about to fast forward through years of football seasons, championship runs, media storms, and a relationship that would eventually become one of the most talked about love stories in modern pop culture. Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift's relationship became a phenomenon. Every game he played, cameras searched the stands for her. Every outfit she wore became news. Their story stopped being just a celebrity relationship and became something almost mythical, something people all over the world were emotionally invested in, whether they even followed football or not. And through all of that noise, through all of that fame, something surprising stayed true. The people who had built real relationships with them early on, the Kittles, were still part of the picture. Fame has a strange way of shrinking someone's circle. The bigger you get, the more people want a piece of you, and the harder it becomes to know who genuinely cares and who just wants to be near the spotlight. But apparently, whatever bond had formed at Tight and University back in 2021 never faded. It just kept quietly growing in the background, season after season, gathering after gathering. Then came the announcement that sent the internet into a frenzy. Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift were engaged, and almost instantly the guessing game began. When would the wedding happen? Where would it happen? Who would be invited? Every entertainment outlet in the world wanted answers, and almost nobody had them, because the couple kept the details locked down tighter than almost anything in recent celebrity history. But behind that wall of secrecy, invitations were quietly going out. And one of those invitations went to George Kittle, that much people probably expected. He was Travis Kelce's close friend, his football brother, his co-founder of Tight and University. Of course, he would be invited. What almost nobody expected was what came next, because along with George Kittle's invitation came something extra, an invitation for his wife, Claire. That also makes sense. But then, almost as a quiet surprise, invitations went out to more than just the two of them. George Kittle's parents, Bruce and Jan, were invited, and so was Claire's mother, Shelley. Think about that for a moment. This was not some massive public wedding with 1,000 loosely connected acquaintances filling out the guest list for show. This was an intimate, heavily guarded, extremely private event. And somehow, the parents of one NFL player's circle made the cut. Not because of fame, not because of business connections, because of real relationships built years earlier at a football camp that started as a fun idea between friends. Kittle later explained it in the simplest way possible. He said Travis really liked his father Bruce. Their friendship had been building since the very first Tight and University back in 2021. And the mothers got their invitations because of that same event a year earlier, where they spent real time getting to know Taylor Swift. Time that clearly meant something to her. So when the day finally came, it was not just George Kittle walking into Madison Square Garden for the wedding of the year. It was 3 generations of his family, his parents, his wife's mother, all gathered together for what Kittle would later describe, without hesitation, as a family outing unlike any other. Now, let's actually step inside that night. Let's walk through the doors of Madison Square Garden, not as basketball fans or concert goers, but as wedding guests arriving for one of the most anticipated ceremonies in recent memory. Madison Square Garden is not just any venue. It carries decades of history. It has hosted championship fights, historic concerts, playoff games that live forever in memory. It is often called the world's most famous arena. And on this particular night in early July, it was transformed into something entirely different. Not a sports arena, not a concert hall, a wedding venue for 2 of the most famous people on the planet. Try to imagine what that transformation must have looked like. The usual roar of a crowd replaced by something quieter, more intimate, even inside a building built for thousands. Around 1,000 guests were there that night, a number that sounds enormous for a wedding, but is almost shockingly small for a couple of this level of fame. That detail matters. It tells you something about how this event was designed, not as a spectacle for the world to watch, but as a genuinely personal gathering for the people who actually mattered to Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. Among those guests were the Kittles, walking into a building that George Kittle had probably walked into many times before for entirely different reasons, but never like this. Never as a wedding guest watching one of his closest friends get married. Now here is where the details Kittle shared really start to paint a picture. He described the wedding, using the exact same word twice for emphasis. Fantastic. Not good. Not nice. Fantastic. The kind of word people usually reserve for something that genuinely surprised them, something that exceeded whatever expectations they walked in with. And one of the specific moments he highlighted was a performance from comedian Adam Sandler. According to Kittle, Sandler did not just show up and do a polite little bit. He absolutely crushed it. Kittle described sitting in his seat, laughing, genuinely enjoying himself in a way that clearly stuck with him even weeks later when he was retelling the story on a podcast. Now picture that scene for a moment. A wedding reception filled with some of the most recognizable faces in music, sports, film, and entertainment. And in the middle of it, Adam Sandler steps up and delivers a performance so good that even a professional athlete who has performed in front of roaring stadiums full of tens of thousands of screaming fans is sitting there giggling like a kid. That tells you something about the tone of the night. This was not a stiff, overly formal celebrity affair. It sounds like it had real warmth to it, real laughter, real joy. But the wedding was not just about comedy and celebration. It was also, of course, about love. And this is where the story gets especially touching, especially for anyone who has followed Taylor Swift's music career. At some point during the celebrations, before the actual wedding day itself, Taylor Swift performed. And in that performance, she dedicated a very specific song to someone in the crowd. The song was Love Story, one of her most beloved hits from her early career. A song about young love and against the odds romance that helped define an entire generation of her fans. She dedicated that performance, her final performance, as a fiancée before officially becoming a married woman, to a member of the tight end community. Because apparently, that song held a personal connection. It had once been mentioned as a favorite, and in a room full of some of the most influential people in the world. In one of her very last moments before marriage, she chose to acknowledge that connection publicly. Now, sit with that for a second. Taylor Swift is someone whose every lyric gets analyzed by millions of fans around the world. Her songs carry deep personal meaning, not just for her, but for everyone who has ever felt something listening to them. And in this incredibly intimate, incredibly significant moment, right before she became Travis Kelce's wife, she used her music to acknowledge a friendship built through football, through tight end university, through the very same community that had brought George Kittle's family into that room in the first place. It is a small detail in the grand scheme of the wedding, but it says so much about how genuinely connected this couple was to the people around them. This was not a wedding where celebrities showed up because it was the event of the year. This felt, based on everything described, like a wedding filled with people who actually mattered to Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce personally. Now, let's talk about the details that the fashion world instantly latched onto, because even amid all of this warmth and personal connection, this was still, undeniably, one of the most fashionable weddings in recent memory. Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce both wore custom designs from Christian Dior haute couture. This was not an off-the-rack gown. This was not a rental tuxedo. These were bespoke pieces created specifically for them by Jonathan Anderson, the creative director overseeing Dior's women's, men's, and haute couture collections. According to a representative for Swift, this marked the designer's very first couture wedding dress created for a world-renowned celebrity. Think about the weight of that statement. Out of every celebrity wedding that could have been the first, it was this one. The shoes were custom made by Christian Louboutin, the designer famous for those unmistakable red-soled heels that have become an entire symbol of luxury fashion on their own. And the jewelry worn by the bride came from Cartier, one of the most historic and prestigious jewelry houses in the world. Every piece of that outfit was chosen with intention. Every detail was custom. Nothing was left to chance. And yet, despite all of that glamour, despite the world-class designers and the priceless jewelry and the iconic venue, the story that actually stuck with George Kittle, the detail he chose to highlight weeks later, was not the fashion. It was the laughter. It was Adam Sandler's performance. It was his parents getting invited because of a friendship built years earlier. It was the feeling of the whole thing being, in his own words, fantastic. That contrast tells you something important about this wedding. On paper, it had every element of an untouchable, larger-than-life celebrity spectacle. Couture gowns, custom jewelry, an iconic venue, a guest list packed with famous faces. But underneath all of that spectacle, the people who were actually there seemed to remember it the same way anyone remembers a great wedding. Good food, good laughs, family close by, a song that meant something. Now, let's rewind for a moment and talk about how unusual it actually is for an NFL player's parents to end up at an event like this in the first place. Because this detail deserves more attention than it might first appear to get. Think about the sheer number of people who orbit around someone as famous as Taylor Swift or Travis Kelce. Business partners, industry executives, longtime friends from before fame ever entered the picture, family members, fellow celebrities. The guest list for a wedding like this had to be an incredibly difficult puzzle to solve, especially when trying to keep the number around 1,000 people, which, again, sounds massive, but for two people this famous is actually a very tightly controlled number. And somewhere in that puzzle, room was made not just for George Kittle and his wife, but for two sets of parents who, on paper, had no direct professional connection to either Taylor Swift or Travis Kelce. Bruce Kittle was not an NFL player. Jan Krieger was not a music industry executive. Shelley Till was not a longtime celebrity friend. They were parents, ordinary in the sense that fame had nothing to do with why they were there. And yet there they were, seated inside Madison Square Garden, watching one of the most talked about weddings of the decade unfold in front of them. That is the part of this story that feels the most human. Because underneath every layer of fame, every designer gown, every celebrity guest, every headline, this was still, at its core, a wedding built on relationships. Real ones, the kind that get built slowly over years through shared experiences that had nothing to do with cameras or headlines. Tight End University was never designed to be a pipeline into celebrity culture. It was built as a football camp, a place for players to get better at their craft and build camaraderie with each other. Nobody involved in creating it back in 2021 could have possibly predicted that, years later, it would become the reason a group of parents ended up inside one of the most closely watched weddings in modern pop culture history. But that is exactly what happened. And it happened because people showed up year after year and built something real. Now, let's talk about what happened after the wedding, because the story does not end the moment the ceremony was over. Once the wedding took place, George Kittle and his wife, Claire, did what a lot of people do after attending a meaningful event. They shared their feelings publicly. They posted photos from the special day, celebrating the couple with warmth and humor. Their caption played on the idea of finding your exclamation point, a small nod to a life milestone worth celebrating loudly. They called it a family affair and congratulated the newlyweds with genuine excitement. That phrase, family affair, comes up again and again in how this whole story has been described, not just by outside reporters trying to characterize the event, but by George Kittle himself, describing his own experience. And that consistency matters. It suggests this was not just a clever soundbite crafted for a headline. It genuinely felt that way to the people living through it. Weeks passed after the wedding. The internet, as it always does, kept buzzing with questions. What was it really like inside? What happened that the public did not see? And slowly, details started to trickle out, mostly through interviews with people who had actually been there. One of the moments where more of the story emerged was actually before all this, at the 2026 gathering of Tite and University itself, the very event that had started this entire chain of relationships years earlier. Taylor Swift showed up there as well, spending time with the Tite and community again, just weeks before her own wedding. Kittle later reflected on how remarkable that was. Here she was, incredibly busy, incredibly close to one of the biggest days of her entire life. And she still made time to show up and give her attention to this football gathering that had, in many ways, helped bring her and Travis Kelce's worlds together with the people who would eventually stand as guests at her wedding. Kittle expressed genuine gratitude about that. He talked about how thankful they all were that she chose to be there, especially with her wedding so close on the horizon. It is a small window into the kind of person she seems to be within that circle. Not distant, not detached, present, even during one of the busiest, most emotionally significant periods of her life. And then, weeks after the actual wedding, Kittle sat down for that podcast conversation that brought so many of these details into the open. Speaking with Chris Sims on an episode released toward the end of July, he reflected back on the entire experience, still clearly moved by it nearly 3 weeks later. He talked about having so much fun. He talked about how lucky he felt that his parents got invited. He walked through the story of how those relationships had formed, tracing it all the way back to that first Tite and University gathering back in 2021. It is worth pausing here to think about why this story resonates the way it does. Celebrity weddings happen all the time. Famous people marry other famous people, and the world watches from a distance, catching glimpses through professional photographers and carefully worded press releases. But this story feels different because it is being told from the inside by someone who is not just a guest, but someone whose entire family became part of the celebration because of years of real relationship building. It is easy to imagine why so many people find this story compelling. In a world where celebrity culture can often feel manufactured, distant, and transactional, this is a story about loyalty, about a football camp that started as a fun idea between friends, slowly turning into the reason a family got invited into one of the most exclusive weddings of the decade. It is a story about a comedian making a room full of famous people laugh so hard that one of the toughest, most physically dominant athletes in the NFL sat there giggling in his seat. It is a story about a song dedicated in a quiet, personal moment, right before two incredibly famous people became husband and wife. And it is a story about parents, about Bruce and Jan Kittle, about Shelley Till, people whose names most casual football or music fans would never have known otherwise, who ended up seated inside Madison Square Garden because years earlier, at a summer football gathering, they spent real time with people who would go on to become two of the most famous individuals on the planet. And that time meant something. Let's take a moment to really sit with the emotional core of the story, because underneath all the designer fashion and celebrity gossip, there is something surprisingly simple happening here. Think about how relationships actually form in life. Rarely do they happen instantly. Rarely does someone meet another person and immediately know that years down the line, that connection will lead to something as significant as an invitation to their wedding. Real relationships build slowly. They build through repeated interactions, through shared experiences, through showing up year after year and being present. That is exactly what happened here. Nobody walked into that first Tite and University gathering back in 2021 thinking about weddings or fame or headlines. They walked in thinking about football, about camaraderie, about building something meaningful within their sport. And it just so happened that along the way, real friendships formed. Friendships that had nothing to do with status or fame, and everything to do with genuine human connection. And years later, those same friendships became the reason a football player's parents sat inside one of the most talked about weddings in the world, watching one of the most famous couples on the planet exchange vows. There's something almost poetic about that. In an industry built so heavily on image and appearance, on carefully curated public personas. This story is a reminder that real relationships still matter, that fame does not automatically erase genuine human connection, that sometimes the people who end up closest to you are not the ones chasing proximity to your success, but the ones who are simply there, consistently, long before any of that success became what it is today. Now, let's zoom back out and think about the bigger picture here, about what this wedding, and this story specifically, represents in the larger context of Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce's relationship as a whole. Their relationship became one of the most publicly followed love stories in recent memory. Every game appearance, every red carpet moment, every subtle hint dropped in interviews or song lyrics became headline news around the world. And through all of that intense public scrutiny, they managed to keep the actual wedding remarkably private. No massive televised event, no sprawling guest list designed to maximize headlines, just around 1,000 people who genuinely mattered to them, celebrating inside a venue with deep personal and professional significance for both of them. And within that guest list, tucked among fellow celebrities, industry insiders, and lifelong friends, sat a family whose connection traced back not to fame, but to football, not to red carpets, but to a training camp built on friendship. That detail, more than almost any other, captures what made this wedding so genuinely compelling once the real story started coming out. It was not just an exclusive party for famous people. It was a celebration built on real relationships, some of which had been quietly growing for years, completely outside the spotlight, until a wedding invitation brought them fully into view. So where does that leave us now? Weeks after the wedding, with George Kittle's account finally giving the public a clear window into what actually happened that night, it leaves us with a much fuller, much warmer picture of an event that had, until recently, mostly existed as rumor and speculation. We now know that the atmosphere was joyful, filled with laughter, highlighted by a legendary comedic performance from Adam Sandler that left even an NFL tight end laughing uncontrollably in his seat. We know that music played a deeply personal role, with Taylor Swift choosing to dedicate one of her most iconic songs to someone in the crowd during her final performance before marriage. We know that fashion played its part too, with custom Dior, Louboutin, and Cartier pieces marking a genuinely historic moment in couture wedding history. And underneath all of it, we know that real relationships, built years before any of this fame reached its current heights, quietly shaped who got to be in that room. George Kittle did not have to share any of these details. He could have kept that night private, tucked away as a personal memory, shared only with those who were there. But he chose to open up, to give the world a glimpse into what that celebration actually felt like from the inside. And in doing so, he gave millions of people something they clearly wanted. Not just gossip, not just headlines, a real story about real connection, hiding behind one of the most talked about weddings in recent memory. And maybe that is the real takeaway here. Beneath the fame, beneath the couture gowns and custom jewelry and iconic arenas, this was still at its heart a wedding. Two people who love each other, surrounded by the people who genuinely mattered to them, celebrating a new chapter together. Some of those people happen to be global superstars. Others happen to be a football player's parents, sitting quietly among the crowd. There because years earlier they showed up, they connected, and somebody remembered. But before we close this chapter, let's slow down one more time and walk back through a few of the smaller moments. Because sometimes it is the smallest details in a story like this that end up meaning the most. Think about the moment George Kittle actually got the call, or the message, or however it arrived, telling him that his parents had been invited. Try to imagine what that must have felt like. Not the excitement of getting his own invitation, because at that point, that probably felt expected. He was Travis Kelce's close friend and business partner in building Tight and University. Of course, he would be there, but his parents, his mother and father, who had spent their lives supporting him through a football career, sitting in the stands at countless games, driving him to practices, watching him grow from a young athlete into an NFL star. suddenly being told they had a seat reserved inside one of the most exclusive weddings on the planet. That is not something you plan for. That is not something you expect, no matter how close you are to the people getting married. And yet, according to Kittle, it happened almost naturally, almost as an extension of years of small moments that had built up quietly in the background. A conversation here, a shared laugh there, hours spent together at a football gathering that most people would never think twice about. Now, picture the actual day arriving. Picture Bruce and Jan Kittle, along with Shelley Till, getting ready, knowing they were about to walk into Madison Square Garden, not as spectators, not as fans watching from a distance, but as invited guests at the wedding of two people whose love story had captivated the entire world. There's something almost surreal about that image. Ordinary parents suddenly stepping into an extraordinary moment, simply because of who they were and the relationships they had built. And once inside, according to everything Kittle described, they were not treated as outsiders or afterthoughts. They were part of the celebration, part of the laughter during Adam Sandler's performance, part of the atmosphere during Taylor Swift's final performance as a fiancé, part of a night that Kittle himself called, without hesitation, fantastic. Let's also take a moment to think about the broader emotional undercurrent running through this entire story, because there is a theme here that goes beyond football, beyond music, beyond celebrity culture entirely. It is a theme about time, about how the things we build slowly, without any expectation of reward, sometimes end up leading to moments we never could have predicted. Nobody involved in creating Tight and University back in 2021 was thinking about weddings. They were thinking about football, about building something meaningful for a position in the sport that often gets overlooked. And yet, through the simple act of showing up, year after year, being present, building real relationships instead of surface-level connections, something unexpected happened. A friendship between two football players turned into a friendship between families. A visit from Taylor Swift turned into hours of genuine conversation with two mothers who had no idea that that moment would eventually lead to a wedding invitation years later. It is easy to imagine that Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce could have filled their wedding guest list entirely with other celebrities, industry executives, and lifelong friends from before their fame. Nobody would have questioned that. Nobody would have expected anything different. But instead, they made room for a family whose only real connection to their world was built through genuine friendship, formed one summer gathering at a time. That decision says something about the kind of people they are, at least based on what Kittle has shared. It suggests that despite everything, despite the fame, despite the constant public attention, they still valued the relationships that had nothing to do with status. They still remembered the people who showed up early, who stayed consistent, who never asked for anything in return except genuine friendship. Now, let's think about what this story means for the countless people around the world who have followed Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce's relationship from the very beginning. For years, fans watched from a distance, piecing together clues from public appearances, interviews, and song lyrics, trying to understand the real story behind the headlines. And now, through accounts like the one George Kittle shared, a fuller picture is finally starting to emerge. Not the polished, carefully managed version presented through official statements and designer credits, but the real human version, filled with laughter, family, and quiet moments of connection that happen far away from any camera. That is ultimately what makes this story so compelling. It is not just about a celebrity wedding. It is about the surprising, sometimes unexpected ways that real relationships shape the biggest moments in our lives. It is about a football camp that started as a fun idea between friends, slowly growing into something much bigger than anyone could have predicted. It is about parents who spent years quietly supporting their children's careers, suddenly finding themselves seated inside one of the most talked about weddings in modern history, not because of fame, but because of genuine connection. And it is about a comedian who apparently brought the house down, about a song dedicated in one final performance before marriage, carrying more meaning than most people in that room probably even realized in the moment. About custom couture gowns and Cartier jewelry existing side by side with ordinary family laughter and inside jokes. Somewhere between the designer fashion and the family stories, between the global superstars and the parents who never expected to be there, this wedding became something bigger than a single celebrity event. It became a reminder that even at the highest levels of fame, the moments that matter most are often the simplest ones. A shared laugh, a dedicated song, a family brought together not by circumstance, but by years of showing up for each other. George Kittle did not have to share any of this. He could have kept every detail of that night locked away, a private memory shared only among those who were there. But he chose to open up, piece by piece, giving the rest of the world a window into what that celebration truly felt like from the inside. And through his words, we now understand something that no designer credit or press release could ever fully capture. That behind one of the most watched weddings in recent memory was something far more ordinary and far more beautiful than anyone expected. A group of people who genuinely loved and supported each other gathered together to celebrate a new beginning. That is the story George Kittle chose to tell. And now you know